Yep.
So no more revolutionaries, please. And that's exactly what happens in a number of countries. You remember Bangladesh? This is the crisis in which I was instrumental. First, they had Mujibur Rahman. In 1971, he was the leader of People's Party, Awami League, with mustache like Stalin. He was in Russia many times. In 5 years, he was shot by his former colleagues, Marxists. He fulfilled his function. In Afghanistan, it happened 3 times. First there was Taraki, then there was Amin, now there's Babrak Karmal. They killed each other successively, one after another. The moment he fulfilled his duty, the first one demoralized country, the second destabilized, the third one brought it to crisis. Goodbye, comrade. Babrak Karmal comes from Moscow and put into the seat of power. Same thing happened in Grenada recently. Maurice Bishop, Marxist, was killed by Austin, what's his name, General something, who was also a Marxist. Right? So no more revolutions, please. Normalization now. From now on, no more strikes, no more homosexuals, no more women lead, no more kid lead, no more lead, period. For good, solid, democratic, proletarian freedom. That's it. Now, to reverse this process takes enormous effort. When today, United States had to invade Grenada to reverse the process of subversion. Some people say, boy, this is not good, it's not kosher to invade the beautiful country, island of Grenada. Well, why didn't you stop the process here, when Grenada was just approached by leftists? Why not to prevent Maurice Bishop to come in power in the first place? Did Grenadians want him? Very questionable. They didn't know who was Maurice Bishop in the first place. He came to power by coup d'etat himself. Okay? No, we let the situation develop further and further and further until the crisis and normalization very soon. And then the United States decided to invade country, discovering that the country was absolutely a military base for the Soviet Union. Of course, it's a drastic measure. Of course, it's a pity that Marine Corps had to lose, 17 lives. Very bad. Why not to stop the process before it comes to crisis? Oh, no, intellectuals will not let you. It's interference into domestic affairs. They're very careful not to let American administration to interfere in domestic affairs of Latin American countries. They don't mind Soviet Union interfere in this affair. Okay. So
and that's actually an interesting point, because although your initial feeling when he says that is to kind of think, well, I kind of don't like America interfering or the UK interfering with these smaller countries, but then he's also kind of right in that, like, if you take Venezuela, everybody was protesting, hanging out of windows, waving Venezuelan flags because Trump was talking about, respecting the Democrat. I don't know how realistic it was, but the election in Venezuela.
Yeah,
you had more people in America that were, more than happy to watch Putin come in and defend Maduro.
Yeah,
but they were like, listen, we should not be taking whoever the other guy's side.
Well, it's like the impossible paradigm, the impossible dynamic here is that, like, if you're not doing it, somebody else will. And you have to kind of do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it better that your country does it, or does a version of it, or is involved in some way? Do we have enough faith that the basic values of your country are better for that country and also for global politics than something that's more authoritarian, or something that's like Russia or something like that?
Yeah,
now, granted,
or
China. Like, I think a lot of this stuff is a little bit illusory at this point. I don't know if there's a huge, dare I say, huge difference in terms of what motivates people to go in countries, but I do think the methods in which you use it generally are drastically different, even if the results end up being kind of the same. And it is something to think about. It's something like, just like yourself, I struggle with that. I struggle with that as a Westerner, as somebody that maybe has even my own unrealistic concepts of interventionism and stuff like that. I grew up being kind of, just from my family and stuff, being kind of a little bit libertarian-ish.
Yeah.
Like Ron Paul type Republicans, if people are familiar with Ron Paul. Like, that was kind of the worldview that I grew up with. But it is oftentimes, and as much as I may like Ron Paul and stuff, like, it is more complicated. It is. Because do you want these other countries that you perceive to be problematic or evil or whatever, do you want them to have the lion's share of control of the globe?
Even that's what it's about.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there's always this power struggle.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they will force your hand. People can say, I don't want us to do anything outside of America. And I completely understand that. I respect that. It takes a big man to be in a really powerful country and say, I'm going to leave everyone else alone. But what you have to bear in mind is if China, and we've already seen them do it, like in Africa and the Middle East, signing these 30, 40-year deals.
Yeah.
If they're going to come in and basically take over, they're sort of proxy going to take over all of the countries running up to your border. Sometimes it's easier just to get involved with one or two or three countries than actually have to turn around and fight the whole world at some point.
Yeah, and like the Ron Paul perspective would be about like the free market, open trade, have stakes in each other's countries based on some sort of mutual relationship. You have stake in each other's countries and each other's success because you're part of each other's economy to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Which is something I think is completely valid. I don't know if it's always super realistic because of the interference of other countries. Like you said, at some point, your hand will be forced, and it's something that Yuri is kind of saying here. He's like, well, they don't let you do anything until it's too late.
Yeah.
And then they ask you to come step in. But the damage is done. It's already over.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every time.
Where's this process? From here, it takes only and always military force. No other force on earth can reverse this process at this point. At this point, it does not take military invasion of the United States Army. It takes strong action, like in Chile, a CIA covert involvement to prevent the savior from outside to come into power and to stabilize country before it erupts into civil war. Okay? Support the right-wing conservative forces. By money, by crooks or love, doesn't matter. Stabilize the country. Don't let the crisis develop into civil war or invasion. Oh no, your liberals will say it's against the law. The Congress will not appropriate money for covert actions of CIA. Why not? Should we wait till the normalization come and Soviet tanks land in Los Angeles airport? Now, at that point, at the point of destabilization, also the process could be reversed. Again, easily than this. No CIA involvement at this point. You know what it takes here? Restriction of some liberties for small groups which are self-declared enemies of the society. As simple as that. Oh no, the media and liberals will tell you this is against the American Constitution. How can we, by force, deny the civil rights to criminals, for example? It's not good. Okay?
Oh my God.
Okay, if you allow the...
Dude, look at the second box down on the right. Promotion of peaceniks, so social justice warriors, to power, academia, media reevaluation of goals, self-flagellation.
Yeah.
That's freaking crazy.
Because peaceniks is like a shorthand for moral agents, for morals. So they if you put a peacenik up on a pedestal, suggesting that this is the highest ethic a person should be working towards, the ideal, then it'll cause you to, by necessity, engage in things like self-flagellation and reevaluation.
Crazy, man.
Criminals to have civil rights, go on and bring the country to the crisis. This is a bloodless way to do. Curb the rights. I mean, not to put them in prison. No, I'm not talking about putting all the gays from San Francisco in the concentration camp. Do not allow them to take political force. Do not elect them to the seats of power, whether it is municipality level, state level, or federal level. It has to be beaten in the heads of American voters that a person like that in the seats of power is an enemy. Do not be afraid of this word. It is an enemy. If he is not an enemy here, he will be here. Later on, he will be shot, of course. But at this point, he is an enemy. You are doing great service by denying him a right to capitalize on his own crazy ideas and become a powerful man, a man who uses the seat of power. Restriction of certain freedoms and permissiveness at that point would prevent sliding into crisis and probably will return the process of destabilization. To curb unlimited power, monopolistic power of trade unions here at that point would save economy from collapsing. To introduce a law to stop private companies of raping public opinion's mind in the direction of consumerism. No company must have a right to force you into buying more unless you want it. There must be a law. You want to advertise your car? Okay. But not a single mentioning of buying it now and saving money. It must be against the law to force people to consume more. Self-restraint, previously, before this process started, the self-restraint was a business of church, religion. Because our preachers, the fathers of church, would tell us, material values are good, but it's not the prime function of human being. Because you have to live with something. Obviously, the design for our life is not to consume more deodorants.
And like I get it that some people will be put off watching this or listening to it, or valuing it as much as some other people would, because obviously he keeps mentioning religion. But I mean, you could obviously, you could take whatever you want and put it in its place. But I think we could all agree, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or atheist or agnostic, that the real reason, the real purpose of life is, as he says, not to buy more cars and more deodorant.
Yeah, I mean, I think religion, and to a large extent, like he said, it's about what's the term he used? It's about conservative, like not conservatism as a political movement, but just the idea of self-restraint, to restrain yourself from like your primal wants as a person, and it's how we have come up as a society to function. And what we've put into place from that, because then I say this as a secular person, maybe agnostic, I don't even know anymore. But like I can see secular religion. I see what's happened, because especially when in regards to materialism, it's in everything. It's not just in advertisements. It's sold to people as a lifestyle. If you look at even music videos and pop culture, it's all about consuming, and that consumption actually means something to not only your identity but your self-worth. If you can't have the cool car, if you can't have the fucking Nikes, if you don't have the PlayStation, then you're just not as good as somebody else. That's how people are made to feel. Like he said about this whole thing, like buy now and save later. Like, right? They have to present everything as it's like a benefit to you. It's a value to you. You spend the money now, then you're not going to have to worry about it later, which isn't the truth, because there'll always be something else to buy. There's always, like, even if you were just to think about cars.
Yeah.
Like, you could spend the money up front to buy like the good car, but then there's all the stuff that comes up after that.
And by the time you've paid it off, there's a new model out, and your car doesn't look as good anyway.
There's a new model out. It requires you to take care of it. If you buy a more higher end car, maybe if something breaks, the parts are more expensive. Or just the accoutrements you can buy to add on to your car. There's always something else. There's always something that is going to signal to people that you are of higher status than you were before. That's why people go into debt over shit like this, like, because it's like becomes a status symbol. It becomes your worth as a person. And this is how we display it to our fellow man. Like, oh, I'm successful. Look at this car I have. Look at my house. It's not about like, what do you need out of life and what is more important in life. This is something I'm very happy. And I met a woman that like kind of felt the same way. It's like, well, we may never be like super rich, but we're always going to have each other. And there are way more things, or there are things that are way more important than worrying about stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not something I do not worry myself with about whether I can buy a fucking Maserati or have a 5,000 square foot house, which I will never occupy most of the rooms in. Like, it just doesn't mean anything to me personally. Maybe I'd feel differently if I was rich. I don't know. Like, now I'm okay. I don't get depressed because I can't have things that other people have, but a lot of people do. And a lot of that has been reinforced culturally.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I feel like if you have a good partner in life, geez, that's worth a lot. Like, having like a really solid partner, I think takes a lot of that, that kind of how to put it? It stops you thinking like, I need to have this to be happy. I need to get to this point to be successful or happy, because you just feel like I'm good, man.
Well, because you live for each other and you live for your family that you're creating, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes more important than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, when you're young, those things they feel like they matter more.
Yeah,
They do feel
definitely.
like they matter more, but, like, once you start living for each other, it just changes the paradigm. It changes your perspective, or it should. I would hope, again, in a perfect
Yeah,
situation, it does do that. It doesn't do that for some people. That doesn't happen, obviously, and I understand there's so many cultural forces and so much inundation and so much propaganda that people have to basically fight against to even have some sense of self-awareness. And
yes.
most people don't. I mean, we live in a world that, like, being a fucking moron is a virtue. Being an ignorant idiot is, like, virtuous. Like, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's so depressing. And, like, people will, like,
Well, certainly being a sheep is virtuous nowadays.
oh, yeah. I mean, even, like, like, some of the public intellectuals. Mentioned, like, Sam Harris earlier, Jordan Peterson, or
Mm,
whatever. Like, people have a problem with them just because they exist, and then they, like, will poo-poo people that listen to them just to try
mm,
to engage their minds a little deeper than the fucking whatever TV show whatever Marvel movie comes out. Like,
yeah.
you're a nerd and you're an idiot. I can't believe you pay attention to that shit. All you're doing is being sold something else, which is partially true, by the way. But at the very least, it may encourage people to think a little fucking deeper about their own existence,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I mean, like, listen, it's incredibly rare that that somebody as successful as Jordan Peterson is not going to offer people anything, because what a lot of people forget is that there are people that want something more. You're not going to get someone that is like, to those people that really value Jordan Peterson, for example, it's going to be pretty rare that none of those people are like, please, if you could put this down in a book, I'll buy it tomorrow. So
No, yeah.
you're gonna get a lot of people that are begging for that.
Well, Jordan Peterson's success is indicative of that, right? Like, that
Exactly.
people were starving for meaning,
Yeah.
especially young men, because we in Western culture hates young men.
It
Hate
does.
hates it.
100%.
Hates it. I mean, we grew up in the 90s and the coming of age in the 90s and the early 2000s. That's what all it was. It was all about how, like, toxic masculinity may be a phrase that came about in, like, 2010, 2011,
Yeah.
but that was the sentiment for 20 some odd years.
100%. And like, my kids, they're basically still being taught it today, like in schools. They I
Exactly. Well,
gave
that was that interview that you did.
yeah, and like more recently, I've had another teacher that's bringing up, hardcore feminism, and the gender pay gap. And I gave him a couple of talking points to maybe talk back to her about, and she basically just said, I'm really glad that you've got so much knowledge on this area," but then just completely ignored him.
Well, the whole thing is, like, why the fuck are you talking to your son's 13, right?
Yeah,
Why are you talking to 13-year-olds about that?
exactly. Well,
Why?
I don't want them to talk to him about
What is that?
either
Like,
side.
how is that going to help him at all? How is that going to inform, like, him being able to be a successful, productive individual? It doesn't do anything. Doesn't
No,
do a goddamn thing. It's just propaganda, and
it's
it's just there to
exactly
make you feel bad. Just to
yeah,
make you feel bad for fucking being born. Your
yep,
immutable characteristics. It's sexist, it's racist, it's whatever. Like, there's so many of these things that are supposed to be like, oh, these are progressive, these are woke, this is the future. They are the very things that they rail against.
yep, yeah, and it's everything that Yuri is telling us about.
Yeah.
Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish